Welcome everyone! As you can tell, this is a new series that I am starting up, and it's called First Impressions. I know, creative, right? On this show, I give you my first impressions of a game. Give you what I think about the combat, what I think about the music, the atmosphere, and this is all within 1, 2, maybe 3 hours of gameplay, depending on the complete length of the game. And most of these games will be either new or they will be old. It all depends on time, money, and all those kind of things. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. I will work my hardest to get that game or whatever it is you want to send my way and give you a honest impression about the game and what I think. So, without any further ado, Transistor. First thing I gotta say is, I was sucked into the game as soon as I started playing it. As soon as I picked up the controller and started playing the game, I could not stop playing it. It was actually pretty hard to stop myself from playing it just so I can make this video. The things that sucked me in the most is just the music, the art style, and just the overall atmosphere. And to use the word captivated would be too weak in my experience with this game, just because this game is pretty much built around this atmosphere that pretty much relaxes you as you play, but at the same time you have this feeling of mystery that you want to move on and find out what's going on, what happened, why am I starting out right here? Why did I start here? What's this guy? What's with the sword? So you immediately thrown into the game, and you're already asking yourself these questions. So like, what's going on? What's happening? And that music, it brings you right into it. Now the atmosphere, I have to say, is quite dark. Like I said, it's pretty mysterious. It gives you a very mysterious tone to how the game plays, and the kind of Art Deco styling of everything. Art Deco with a bit of 1940s fashion, you could say, because you have all the triangles, which is the Art Deco and the digital look, and then you have the kind of the flare hats and the dresses and stuff like that. All the men with business have suits on, and it kind of gives you a Broadway feel from the 1940s. And I really love that, really. I love that part of the game. And it brings out the music even more, which is probably, from what I've played so far, is probably the main attraction of the game, the main experience.
Oh no. Cut off our escape.
The game starts you out just abruptly, starts you into the game. And the first thing you see is a guy laying there with a sword in his chest. And this sword actually has a voice that kind of guides you through the game. It basically explains things to you as you go through the game. Or, not really explain, but it points out things and helps you go through it. It helps tell the story. Another game comes to mind that kind of does this same thing is Bastion, where it has an overall narrator of the game, and that's basically what's happening here. But there's more of a personal connection with this sword and the character you play, Red. But I have to say, the game is very story driven. You wander the levels trying to figure out what's going on, what happened. And through the game so far, you'll look at data terminals and posters of a very musical culture, and you have these weird things that are attacking you through the game with it have actually quite funny names, in my opinion. There's a big guy called the Jerk, you got the Creeps, you have Bad Cells, and there's all other bosses and stuff that you have to fight as well. And they all also have their own names, or they have their actual personalities from maybe a person that once lived, and you're wandering these places, and you discover all these things and all these people that it just brings out more mystery. Like, what's going on? And once you find these terminals, it becomes clear, like, something really big has happened. And it could revolve around you, but you're not sure. And that's from the experience I had so far. The combat in the game is amazing for what kind of game you're playing. You have your RPG elements, you have your strategy elements, and you have your action-oriented elements. And I thought the game was going to be very, very strategy-based. And I don't like those kind of games, personally, that you have squares, you move the character from square to square to square, or you have a set amount of movement you can only do. I'm not a big fan of those kind of games, but this one has a great mixture of both, in my opinion, and the music brings me into it, which is probably the main reason why I keep playing it still. But the combat, you have a set movement that you can do with a strategy phase, but you basically pull the right trigger and everything turns black. And then you move a certain amount of spaces or a certain movement, and you either attack, you move away from the enemy, and you have this bar at the top that lowers as you do these commands. And then you pull the right trigger again, and she executes these commands and attacks the enemies and walks around the enemies if you want to, or just run around circles, which I've done it once or twice in there. Yeah, had to. The combat gets pretty difficult when you're trying to learn it and you're getting your butt kicked for pretty much the first 30 minutes of the game, but you will get used to it. It's all about strategy.
We're clear.
You have your backstabs, you have your controlling powers that can take control of the enemy, and you have your long range attacks, you have your short range that bounces between enemies. And that's part of the RPG element, so I'll get to that. And you have to really strategize. If you don't use that pause system so you can strategize, you will die. Because all the enemies move a little bit too fast for your character to move around. She's not quick. And she has this power that makes her be able to move all over the place. But I could say it is very action-oriented. Because you're constantly running, constantly attacking, you're constantly trying to get away from these enemies, trying to get behind these walls so they don't attack you and hurt you. There's a lot of pressure in this. You could say that about maybe staying alive, and later on in the game will probably get very, very difficult. But as of right now, it's pretty straightforward, and I did almost die a couple of times against a boss within the first few parts of the levels for the first hour. Just because the attacks hurt. That's all I can really say about that. I don't want to spoil anything about that character because that's actually a really big part of the story. The combat is simple, but the strategy element is hard. You have 4 buttons at the bottom of the screen. When you first start the game, you only have 2 of those buttons at that time. The game focuses on poke and run tactics. I think that explains it best. You poke the enemy and you run. You poke the enemy, then you run. And then when you start using a strategy element, the pause button, you poke the enemy a couple times, then run. That's what it basically is. There's no hack and slash in this game. You can't just keep mashing the A or X buttons. You can't do anything like that. It's very strategy oriented, but it feels like an action game. Also, a big thing to keep in mind when you play this game is you need to let your bar recharge, or the sword will keep telling you, not yet. Now, on to the RPG side of the game. The game sets you up with 2 abilities at the beginning, and over time you gain 2 more abilities or more abilities throughout the game. At current, I have 5 abilities with some sub-attributes that I can actually attach to these abilities. You have these access points in the game, spread across the game, that makes it to where you're able to add to these abilities or add attributes to the abilities or equip them, or you can even just read about the abilities and about the person that they came from. Each one gives you a different way of attacking situations. That is actually the best way to put it. It's like for me right now, I have 4 abilities, 5 in total, and I have Breach, Spark, Jaunt, and Crash. Those are the 4 abilities the main abilities that you have in the beginning of the game. Crash is pretty much your standard melee attack from the beginning of the game. Then you have Breach, which is your longer distance melee attack. You could call it a ranged attack if you want, but your ranged attack is actually Spark, which doesn't cause any lines in the ground. It's an actual, in a way, a projectile that hits your target and particles ensue. Then Jaunt is kind of like a dodge feature, in my opinion. It's what I've been using to get out of the way of certain enemies and stuff like that, get across the battlefield as fast as possible. Now, when I say you can attach things to your main abilities, you can attach things such as Bounce, which, like it sounds, you can hit an enemy, and the attack will bounce between the enemies. Like at current, I have it applied to my very first ability, Crash. So when I hit the target in front of me, it hits the target next to it and another target after that, depending on the upgrades you get. Then I have another ability, Spark, which I probably showed a little bit earlier, that will control the enemy. I put it on Spark because of the range. I can actually stay a good distance away and use it, and so I can run away at the same time. But that's all I have to really say about Transistor. And if you liked it, awesome. If you didn't, awesome. It doesn't really affect me, because I'm making these videos for fun, and all I want to do is spread the word about these amazing games out there, and give everybody my first impression, what I am thinking when I first play the game. None of this stuff is scripted. I will continue to make it unscripted, because that's what being a gamer is. You don't script what you're thinking. It's the best way to do it, but if you're thinking this way about a game, you're thinking this way about a game. So I'm trying to keep it as unscripted as possible. Of course, there's going to be the script, as in the order that I talk about everything. But when it comes down to what I say, it's just me, my brain, telling me what to say, and sometimes I slur. But as I said, these are my first impressions. I have yet to complete the game myself, and I'm about an hour into the game, maybe an hour and a half. And with that in mind, keep gaming. I will see you guys next time.